Hello, and welcome to Bluestocking Stories, Mary Baldwin University's podcast about the people and stories that make our community. I'm glad to have you listening as I interview Dr. David McLeod, Associate Professor of Health Sciences and Kinesiology. Dr. McLeod joined Mary Baldwin just over a year ago in the fall of 2023 when he was tasked primarily with overseeing the anatomy and physiology education of undergraduate students. By training, he is a biologist focused on amphibians, but his career as a professor has mostly revolved around human anatomy, including previous stints at the University of Kansas and James Madison University. I really enjoy speaking with David, and I'm glad we found the opportunity to share some of these conversations with you. David, welcome to the show.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
So in choosing what topic from your career to begin this interview with, it was actually kind of daunting to me because I really find all of what you do so exciting. But for the sake of simplicity, maybe, let's start with your role as a professor.
Sure.
Why do you think you found yourself teaching anatomy time and time again?
I fell into anatomy. So when I was first a graduate student at the University of Kansas, I remember walking into the graduate student coordinator's office and she said, "Oh, I see you took anatomy as an undergrad. Do you think you could teach it?" And I was an educator. I'd come from teaching high school and I thought, I could teach anything. So foolishly, I said, "Sure, I can teach anatomy." And then I got into the course, into the lab, and I realized how I was completely unprepared for the depth of anatomy that we were teaching our students at. But I loved it. And I worked with a team of undergraduates that were my TAs, and that first semester, they carried me through. And from then on, I have always taught anatomy. I totally fell in love with teaching it because there's nothing more relevant than our human body to everybody, right? Like, It doesn't matter what your major is. You carry around this shell with you your whole life. So why shouldn't we all understand it? And that graduate level lab TA position that I first started with, that turned into becoming the director of anatomy at Kansas and a full-time position before I even finished my PhD. And then every job I've applied for and gotten since then has been anatomy related because it's a tool in my toolbox that everybody seems to have a need for.
And is there just greater demand for anatomy?
Yeah, every school needs an anatomy and physiology instructor. And I don't know. I don't know if it's that we're not training enough anatomists or if there's just always an increasing demand as more people are going into the health sciences. We have an increased need for people who can teach the basics like human anatomy and physiology.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously we know it's one of the fastest growing professional fields in the world.
Yeah, for sure.
Health sciences. So it just makes sense, I guess, right? Is there something especially exciting for you about teaching anatomy to undergraduates specifically?
So until last spring, I have only ever taught undergraduates. I taught faculty at one point, but they don't really count. But I got to teach the PA anatomy here at Murphy-Deming. I got to work in the lab with Dr. Hancock last year, and that was a great experience. I loved teaching the PAs. But man, when you take undergrads who are just embarking on this journey, and they usually come to class with no knowledge, no concept of what the human body is. And I start out and I say, you're going to learn a foreign language in one semester, and I expect you to be fluent in it. And that's crazy. And I acknowledge that. It's fun watching them kind of be blown away by that and then grapple with it and then succeed in it. And I know that what I'm doing, I think what I really enjoy about it is I know that what I'm doing is I'm preparing them for the next part of their journey. I know that if they do well with me, when they get to graduate school, they will do just fine. And that anatomy course in grad school, when you're in professional school, that's kind of the sorting hat, right? That's the weed out course where first year med students, first year PA students, that's going to be the course. If they haven't been well trained, they're going to struggle with it. And what I want my students to get there and flourish in it, where they're like, oh man, first year anatomy, medical school, grad school, it was easy because I did this. So I don't know, I think I'm future looking with it, if that makes sense.
Okay. Now, I guess, man, I've never taken anatomy myself. I hearing you talk about it does make me desperately want to like audit the course or something.
It's a lot of work, man. Don't do it.
But so what does anatomy class look like for our undergraduate students? My understanding from friends who, studied health science related things, like it's a lot of terms and, memorization type stuff. Or
on one hand, it seems that way because, like I said, you're learning a whole language and you're expected to be fluent in it in a semester. And we don't do that with a foreign language course, but we do that with anatomy. But for my students, I try to steer them away from just this idea that anatomy is rote memorization and regurgitation. Because if all they can do is regurgitate the name of a structure, it doesn't give them an understanding of what it is, where it fits, what it does. And so for my students, I hope that what the course looks like is building a 3-dimensional model of the human body in their mind's eye. And it's the kind of learning transformation. If all you do is memorize terms, you just have a list of terms. But if you can build this working model of the human body in your mind's eye, and what I tell my students is there will come a day where you'll be walking on campus and you'll see somebody that has kind of a hitch in their giddy up. They've got their gait doesn't look quite right. And all of a sudden you're going to start to see through them, and you won't see them, you'll see their skeletal system, and you'll see how it's moving, and you'll be trying to sort out, well, what's off here? And then you'll be putting muscles on it, and you'll be going, well, what's happening? And I was like, it's going to unnerve you when that happens.
Yeah.
But when that happens, you know that you're getting it. Like, you know that you are really starting to understand human anatomy.
Now, right before we were started our recording here, we were talking about the article that at the time of recording is soon to release about some of the changes that you've brought to our anatomy offerings here at Mary Baldwin. What can you tell me about that? So what's new about what we're offering to students? What kind of resources have you brought to the table?
We've made a lot of changes in the last year, and we've done it at a time where when I said, these are the things I want to do, and people were like, oh, I don't think that's going to happen. And I was like, no, this is going to happen. And it has. And it has because people have been huge supporters of what we're doing. So what have we done? We have completely transformed anatomy and physiology. It used to be that it was a combined course. So you did a little bit of anatomy, you did a little bit of physiology, and it was a 2-semester course. So you worked your way through the entire body over the course of a year. And what I did at the beginning was I said, let's separate this. So let's make fall semester just anatomy. So you learn the pieces and parts. And then let's make spring semester physiology, where you start, once you've got a foundation and you know what it is, then let's figure out what it all does and how it does it. For the anatomy part of it, then by pulling out just anatomy, you can really focus on the organism. You can focus on the structure of the human body. And in order to do that, I said, I really want to have human cadavers. And I've taught in a cadaver-based program throughout my career. But sometimes that cadaver-based program is where you use a dry body, effectively, a plastinated cadaver. So it's a real human cadaver, but you can't really touch it and you can't feel it, and you miss the tactile part. But it looks right. It's not like a plastic model. It is a real human cadaver. But I've also taught where we use real human cadavers. And there's a huge kinesthetic part of that learning experience that transforms transforms anybody's learning,
Sure.
but especially our undergrads, because all of a sudden they can see it and feel it and move it around and pick up an organ and see what's underneath it and see what's beside it and they can see differences. If they have 2 or 3 or 4 bodies to look at, they go, wow, they all basically look the same, but nobody is exactly the same. So we brought cadavers in. Last year we started with 1, and this year we have 2 cadavers in our lab. And then to facilitate that, we did an overhaul of our lab. We had the room that was used for anatomy and physiology, and still is, used to have these fixed wooden benches in them. And it was kind of a traditional lab. And so one of the things I love about Mary Baldwin is I love our traditional classrooms. I love walking into our rooms and going, it just has like this feeling of learnedness. And so like our environment, our learning environment is really cool. But I needed something that was a little more flexible and where I could put cadaver tables in our room and have students shuffling around. So we pulled out all the fixed benches. We put in some rolling tables and our rolling chairs and our rolling cadaver tables and our rolling computer stations, and everything's movable now. So this fall, man, the environment in our classroom just feels completely different than what it ever has before. That has meant that our students are able to work more efficiently, and they can go from their table to the cadaver, back to their table, whereas last year they would have to go from their table downstairs to another room, see the cadaver, come back upstairs, and they couldn't go back and forth. I think the third thing that we did, which has been a huge improvement, is we were able to purchase a whole bunch of new anatomical models. So having the cadaver is great, but you can't put everybody on a cadaver at one time.
Sure.
And we needed new models. Biology supported a lot of that, and Murphy Deming supported some of that, and we purchased new models, new materials that students can work with. And then Murphy Deming's been fantastic about allowing me to borrow models and resources that aren't being used in this semester. I can bring them over to our campus, use them here, they go back, and then the graduate students can use them again. So we're really trying to maximize the resources that we have. So together, I think all of that together has meant that anatomy now looks like a pure anatomy course. Physiology looks like a pure physiology course. And the resources that we can dedicate to those courses, we have just jumped up like 5 levels of excellence. And that makes a lot of difference to the students, giving them the tools that they need to do the learning.
I have to say, visiting the classroom, you mentioned that old style, like high academic kind of feeling that a lot of these classrooms have, but you had to remove some of that stuff. But I really do think having all those models, it just does feel like I'm in science school, like
That's good. That's the goal.
It's all these models. It's sort of like the ones that are like a bifurcated torso.
Yeah.
Like, you see all of people's insides and stuff. And I'm like, it does feel very academic walking in there.
Yeah.
How have students responded to these changes?
They love it. So yeah, they love it. And last year, the other thing I did, I guess, when I got here last year was I said, we can't always be in the lab. We need another space where students can learn. And so I built an anatomy resource center across the hall from the lab. And those same models that we use in lab, I move them over to the resource center so students can access that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And they are using it. Like the fact that we have a dedicated space for those students. It's not big. You can put 4 or 5 students in it, but you walk by and there are regularly 4 or 5 students packed into that room using the models, using the resources. So how have students responded to it? I think they've really eaten it up. I think they are thriving because of what we've been able to provide.
Now, just for my personal interest,
Sure.
maybe, do you have like a favorite part of human anatomy? Do you love a ball joint? Or
Yeah. So I often in class, I say, if I had a pet organ, it would be the heart, the eye, or the ear. I think those would be my 3 favorite organs in the body.
Any reason?
The ear, like how we hear, just the anatomy and the basic physiology of hearing is mind-boggling. Like the fact that sound waves travel from my mouth, hit your tympanum, get transferred through 3 tiny little bones to another membrane, and then become fluid waves, like from one fluid, air, to a liquid fluid.
Sure.
And then that sets off, that causes little hair cells to bend and sends a signal to your brain, and you understand what you're hearing.
And then not even like the fact that some of what you're hearing is words, and then we're processing that. And
it blows my mind. And the eye is similar, right? The eye is simple, and complex all at the same time. And the heart, I don't know. I think I love the heart.
You can't underrate the heart.
You can't.
I guess.
No,
It's pretty critical.
You can hold it in your hand. It's big enough to look at it and see it in detail. And then you think, man, this thing carries me from the moment it starts to beat until I'm done. And it's autonomous, and yet I can influence it. And like, its structure is kind of simple. It's 4 chambers, but yet it does the same thing that every other organism's heart does, whether you've got 2 chambers, 3 chambers, 3.5 chambers, 4 chambers. Like, hearts are cool, man.
Now, I think listeners have probably already picked up on this, but I was planning to talk about this a little later in the interview, but I'm going to jump to it now.
Okay.
I think you have a little bit of a superpower, David. And I think that your superpower is for going the extra mile. You seem to have this, like the heart, unending energy for making things better for the students that you serve, and honestly for yourself too, and for your coworkers and everything. So I think that listeners have probably heard that in your talk about the anatomy lab, and then you threw in that you have the anatomy resource center across the hall. And I know that you're also working on other projects, other things in your mind. Where do you think is this something that you think about, I guess, or is it just come naturally to you? Is it the excitement of coming to a new position at a new university?
Nah, man, this is just how I am all the time. It's funny that you say it's a superpower, because I've thought about it that way. So in an interview one time, like in a job interview, I was asked, what is your greatest strength and what is your greatest weakness? And I said, well, that's easy. Like, my energy is both of those. Mm-hmm. My energy is my greatest strength, because I'm driven. I have lots of ideas, and I'm driven to try and get things going and start new things and connect people. Like, I've got lots of energy for that. But at the same time, I am old enough, and I think self-aware enough to say it's also my greatest weakness, because I have lots of energy and I want to spend that energy on lots of things. It can be exhausting.
And it's easy to spread yourself thin.
It is. Yeah. So thank you for seeing it as a strength. Like, I appreciate that. And I hope that that energy that I bring to the program, ultimately, I hope it benefits people. Because if it's not benefiting people in a positive, if it's not a benefit to people, then why am I doing it? Because it's not to my benefit. So if I'm not benefiting others, I think I've missed the mark.
Well, I don't even work in the Pierce Science Center, and it inspired me. After taking your little tour of Pierce, I went back home and cleaned my apartment. I was like, I need to take some of David's energy that he's given me and put it to work.
That's funny.
But I am interested in hearing you talk a little bit about some of these other projects that have caught your attention.
The other things. So what else am I doing that isn't really my job, but I keep doing it? One of the things that I noticed when I got to Mary Baldwin was, I've been here a year, and I started meeting folks, and I met our grounds crew, and I realized that we had 4 people working grounds, and they're great guys. They are hardworking guys.
I love them.
Yeah, they're awesome. And I noticed, I just was looking around campus. I'm like, wow, we're planting a lot of annual plants around campus. Now, I'm not a plant guy, but enough. I know enough about plants to go, wow, you plant those every year, and then they die, and we have to pull them out, and we plant them again. And I was like, what if we planted native plants? And what if we planted native plants in particular that were pollinator friendly? And that would do 2 things, right? It would serve an ecological function, providing their environmental services, if we can provide plants that are for pollinators, then pollinators can do their job and everybody benefits. But from a simpler standpoint, if we could plant perennial native flowers, you don't have to pull them up out of the ground. You don't have to do it again next year. Like, let nature do what we're trying to do. And the grounds guys were like, yeah, man, if you want to do it, go for it. So I ended up getting people in town, faculty. Lots of people have been super excited about this. And so they donated plant starts from their gardens, and we planted native flowers and grasses in the space around the Pierce greenhouse. And then we went into a drought. And somehow, between myself and Megan Alderman, who had been working here, and she's now doing her PhD at UVA, but Megan, over the course of the summer, watered things, and they thrived, probably because Megan was taking care of them and not me. But we now have this native garden growing around the greenhouse, and it looks phenomenal. We've got color, we've got pollinators coming in, we've got things that are going to come up again next year, and we can take what we have and subdivide it next year and move it to other places on campus. So it's self-perpetuating.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's been kind of exciting. And then I have this grand vision for the greenhouse. I love our greenhouse.
I really want to hear about this vision on tape.
The grand vision for the greenhouse. So Mary Baldwin's greenhouse was built at the same time that the Pierce Science Center was built. And I've been trying to narrow down an actual date, so I don't really know when it was built, but I would guess in the 1960s. But our greenhouse has fallen into disrepair, and it just kind of fell off the map for the last few years. And so my vision is to get it back functional and have it being used for education and outreach, and just like, man, can you imagine a space that you walked into that was planted with a diversity of plants from all over the world, and you could walk in and just sit in that space? Like, as a student, as a faculty member, as a community member, you could just go and be in nature. And you could do that in March, right? When everything is bleak around us, you could go and sit in a space that was alive. And man, that would do so much for us.
Your personal research, which again, I find fascinating still. Frogs, Southeast Asia. Yep. How does this all start, and what is it all about?
How does it start? It starts when you're like 3 years old and you find frogs and snakes completely fascinating. And for me, by the time I was in second grade in northern Alberta, and I was telling people at that point that I was going to be a herpetologist. Nobody knew what that was. And so I've spent my life explaining that it's not sexually transmitted diseases, that it is the study of amphibians and reptiles, and that I wanted to go to the University of Kansas to be a herpetologist. And I knew that as a kid because my uncle was a herpetologist at the University of Kansas. Okay. So it wasn't just like random that I knew that.
Alberta, Canada.
But I've spent my whole life loving being outside and loving amphibians in particular. Somewhere along the way, I realized snakes could kill me, but I still like them. I just don't study them. And I found frogs fascinating. I thought that I was going to spend my career in Latin America. And as a high school student, as a college student, I was kind of preparing for that. And then when I got out of undergraduate, I had a degree in secondary education biology, and I ended up with a job teaching in Taiwan. I taught high school in Taiwan at a public Chinese public school for 3 years. And during that time, living on the island of Taiwan, I got to see this whole new flora and fauna and these amazing amphibians and reptiles. But I also got to travel. It was a great launching point, and I spent time in Thailand. And in Thailand, I just was blown away by the biodiversity that was there. I ended up at that point deciding I wanted to go back and do my PhD, because I didn't feel like I had all the tools that I needed. I had completed a master's degree. I'd kind of scratched the surface on starting to learn tools of research, but I didn't have enough. And ironically, I thought that I would go back at the completion of my PhD to teaching high school overseas. And I was doing research with high school students when I started this. But I've found myself pretty much teaching college ever since, with 2 years being the exception. But my graduate work ended up being focused on Thailand. And I got a Boren Fellowship, which paid for a year of me to live and work in Thailand, learn language, be in the culture. It was phenomenal. And I did a year of field research. And I was addressing this ecological question, which ultimately I didn't pursue for my dissertation. But instead I found this, I discovered a new species while I was there. And the writing of the description of that species, it was new to science, kind of was opening Pandora's box. And that one species description led to my dissertation, which was trying to resolve the relationships between a whole bunch of frogs in Southeast Asia and getting into studying cryptic species complexes. And ultimately, really just falling in love with the Southeast Asian region. And it's led me to work in Malaysia, Brunei, and Thailand, and then work on species that are found all over, from China to Indonesia to India, like that whole realm. Man, I have just fallen completely in love with it. And what I do now is, and this is one of the other new things I'm trying to do at Mary Baldwin, I try to get students there. I did my first international trip when I was 14, and it changed my life. So I try to get our students overseas whenever possible. So this year I'm proposing a trip to Brunei, and it would be a research-focused study abroad where we could go and I can chase the frogs that I want to chase, and I can expose students to plants and animals and an ecosystem that they would not have seen and a culture that they would not have been a part of. And I get to do it with collaborators and with students from Brunei. And so it's a phenomenal opportunity for us. That was a very rambling way of answering your question. How does it start? I think I just took you all the way through my career.
I wouldn't have it any other way. I love to hear about it.
Sorry for the rambling.
I like how you put it, that you can go and chase the frogs that you're interested in. You told me a funny story about this past May term, that you tagged along with Dr. Paul Callow's field ornithology course.
I did.
What were you doing there?
Chasing frogs. Dr. Callow was teaching the field ornithology class in May term, and one day he said, "We're heading to Maple Flats. Do you want to come?" Which is the Big Levels, Maple Flats area. It's over near Waynesboro.
It's sort of a swamp, right?
It's got a lot of ephemeral pools in it and some large permanent ponds, but it's a phenomenal breeding site for salamanders in the spring. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that day was fun because, birds are reptiles. They're just feathered reptiles. And so I told the students that I was along to do ornithology, but to really introduce them to the non-feathered reptiles and then amphibians as well. And it was just fun. It was the students who were used to looking up at trees and looking for birds were all of a sudden looking on the ground and flipping logs over and looking for salamanders. And two of the students and I ended up standing in a pond for probably 45 minutes, just taking it all in and just being curious and exploring. And at the end of it, they said, "How do we do more of this?" He's like, one of the guys was like, "Man, if I could take a class that was just this, just exploring the world around me," I just thought, man, isn't that what college is supposed to be? Like, it's supposed to be those opportunities where you go, I have never done this before. This is so amazing.
Just like I asked you about your favorite part of human anatomy, and I say this with love and as somebody who's dedicated a lot of time to seemingly unimportant things in my own graduate studies, what about frogs makes them worth all this time? What is it about frogs in particular? I know you said at some point you realized snakes were just venomous.
Not all of them, but some of them.
But why? I mean, I like frogs. You really like frogs.
I really do like frogs. So I think the first thing that comes to mind is amphibians as a group are incredible indicators of environmental health. So that was really where I started in my amphibian research, was looking at changes in amphibian populations related to human disturbance in the environment and how that affected them. Looking at it at the time in the 90s, we were seeing these global declines in amphibian populations and asking questions about why, what was driving them, and we're still asking those. So if you think that, like, we often use the term amphibians are the canary in the coal mine. And as we think about environmental change, climate change, and human disturbance to the world, if our amphibians are declining, then it should be a warning flag. It should be that red flag that we go, oh man, if the amphibians aren't doing really well, we might be next. So what do we need to change? So there's that part of it.
And I have to assume, is this kind of because amphibians have a kind of delicate balance of what they need?
Yeah, well, they live life both on land and in the water. They're exposed to both environments. And a lot of amphibians have like a low tolerance for change. Like if you take out a certain kind of pond, if you took away an ephemeral pond, and this is what I found in my master's work. I was looking at the conversion of ranch land into row crop agriculture. And whereas a rancher doesn't mind if there's just a pool of water that forms in the spring, if you're doing row crop, you want to level that out so that you don't have standing water in your field. But if you take away that ephemeral pool, there are certain frogs that just can't breed in a permanent pond. They just won't. Like that's not where they put their eggs, and that's not where their larvae grow. So they're really sensitive to changes in their environment.
And you mentioned another thing, that maybe the second thing that came to your mind. What was that?
Sure. So frogs in particular, when we think of frogs, hopefully we all think, well, they have this
adorable big eyes.
No, it's their life cycle, right? It's the fact that they deposit their eggs in the water, their eggs turn into tadpoles, and the tadpole looks nothing like the adult. And then they go through the process of metamorphosis, and this thing that we recognize as a frog comes out on land. So
it's bizarre.
It's bizarre, right? It's bizarre. And as I started doing more and more field studies, I started looking more closely at tadpoles. Like as a kid, I thought all tadpoles looked like bullfrog tadpoles, which are kind of this big globby body, not very exciting. And then, or they looked like toad tadpoles, which are a little tiny body and a little tail, and they're usually black or brown. I thought, oh, all tadpoles look like that. That's our generic tadpole. And then I started looking at tadpoles, especially in Southeast Asia, and I was blown away by diversity. Like tadpoles that eat each other, like there are cannibalistic tadpoles. There are tadpoles that live in tree holes. There are tadpoles that have big sucking mouth parts. There are tadpoles that live in fast streams. There are tadpoles. There is a tadpole that has the ability. It has an actual stomach, so that means it can eat like whole prey items, whereas most tadpoles kind of graze on algae, and they're like the cows of the amphibian world. But there's a tadpole out there that it's got this cool mechanism. It has a true stomach, and it just sucks food in whole. That's
like
crazy.
Largemouth bass or something.
Except that it's a tiny little tadpole. It's a tiny thing, and yet it feeds this way. So I think what happened was I think I fell in love with tadpoles, and as a result, Therefore, I like frog biology in general, but tadpoles are incredible.
I never would have guessed this. Well, I never would have guessed.
Most people don't. Even herpetologists. I'm always encouraging my colleagues. Tadpole. I'm like, hey, when you're in the field, collect tadpoles. They're like, nobody can identify them. It's too much of a pain, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, man, this is cool. This is where it's at. And I've been really fortunate to work with people throughout my career who have also found tadpoles fascinating, colleagues and students who have gotten on that boat. And so I don't know, like, man, tadpoles are frogs. Frogs in particular are crazy. But moving here to Virginia, Virginia is as part of Appalachia, we are the the epicenter of salamander diversity in the world.
I have been desperate to find one of these eastern hellbenders.
Oh, the hellbenders! I have never caught one in the wild.
I'm desperate to find one in the wild.
Me too. I have not seen one.
These, if people don't know, these are these sort of giant salamanders.
Yeah, locals call them snot otters, because it's just this brown thing,
maybe 2 feet long, they're pretty large from what I see.
It's North America's biggest salamander, and its relative, if you go to the National Zoo or go to a zoo somewhere, you'll see its relatives, its closest relatives are from China and Japan, and they are the gigantic cryptobranchid salamanders, these things that are like 4 feet long, 5 feet long, and like that's a serious salamander. Ours are impressive at 2 feet long, but their cousins are these giants in Asia.
I think people don't realize that we have that sort of thing here.
We have so many salamanders in Appalachia.
I have to. When I go fishing, the salamanders are sort of the bane of my existence. There's so many of them. They're disturbing the water. They're all
they're not keeping you from catching fish. If you're not catching fish, you can't blame the salamanders.
Unfortunately, I've caught my fair share of salamanders. Well, this whole conversation really is making me think, David. I wonder if there's an opportunity for a tadpole or herpetology podcast for you and I. Like there might be
maybe
the market for it.
I think that's kind of a niche audience, though.
But if the listeners out there are anything like me, they'd be willing to hear you. I mean, we've only scratched the surface on tadpoles, I feel like. Well, thank you so much for joining me for this interview, David.
Sure, it's been my pleasure.
Hopefully, everyone knows, why I was so excited to have you with me today.
Because you got a guest on who could kind of wax about random things for a long time.
Well, and that's back to the energy, right? It's like I call it a superpower, and I don't call it that lightly. So again, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you for listening to this interview with Dr. David McLeod, Associate Professor of Health Sciences and Kinesiology and Energetic Superhero. This has been a production of Mary Baldwin University, with music courtesy of Ivy Music via Pixabay, and technical assistance, as well as a beautiful podcasting studio provided by the Stanton Innovation Hub. I've been Keith Taylor. Thanks again for listening, and I look forward to the next time.